The business cycle represents the ups and downs that are typical of the economy. On the vertical axis is gross domestic product, GDP for short. On the horizontal axis is time. The curve represents the ups and downs of the economy over time. The trough shows when the economy is down, and the peak shows when the economy is up. To understand the business cycle more fully, some additional groundwork is needed. The overall economy is called the macroeconomy. Policymakers have some goals to measure or identify how the economy is doing. There are 3 goals we will use to see how the economy is doing. If these measures are doing well, the economy is doing well. Growth. We measure growth using gross domestic product, GDP. GDP is the sum of final goods and services produced and consumed within the U.S. borders in 1 year. Stable prices. Inflation means the overall price level is rising. Inflation is an issue when prices are increasing more than wages. Unemployment. When the level of unemployment is too high, people are not working. Incomes are diminished, the economy will slow down and growth will decline. GDP can be defined with 4 components. The 4 components are C, consumer spending, I, business spending, G, government spending, X minus M. X is exports and represents spending by foreign countries for our goods. M is spending by the U.S. for foreign goods. X minus M is net exports. The largest component of GDP by far is C, consumer spending. The 4 components of GDP added together are the measure of growth used to assess how the economy is doing. It is important to understand the difference between nominal and real. How are we really doing? If one earns 5% on their savings, but inflation is 6%, their real savings rate is less than 5%. A real rate is defined as the nominal rate less the inflation rate. Thus, when looking at GDP, it is the real rate of GDP growth we want to identify. That will be the real growth rate and tells us how the economy is really doing. With the additional information, we can look again at the business cycle model. We can now analyze the business cycle model with more depth. Notice the vertical axis is labeled real GDP, not nominal GDP. We want inflation to be taken out of the measure of growth. We want to be meeting the macro goals of growth, stable prices, and low unemployment over time. We want the trend of the economy to be trending up. We don't want troughs to be too low or peaks to be too high. When peaks and troughs stay close to the trend line, the economy will be more stable. The economy will not experience out-of-control inflation because the peak is too high and persists. The economy will not experience out-of-control unemployment because the trough is too low and persists. By the way, 2 quarters of negative growth is labeled a recession. Not good. Well, that's it for now. Goodbye.